Southeastern CaroLINES. I am your host, Caroline Fenton, and I am live here at 312 Pizza Company in Germantown, as I am every Saturday morning at 10 a.m., bringing you Southeastern CaroLINES, my slate of the week in SEC football, my picks, kind of some advice for betting. If you want to put some money on the games, if you want to make some money on the games today, that is exactly what I am here for. Now, the slate this week, a little bit underwhelming. A lot of teams on buys. A lot of the matchups aren't crazy exciting. So, you look at the slate this week and it feels very obvious on some of these games that you're going to bet on. Look at Arkansas Pine Bluff and Arkansas. That feels like a pretty obvious game to put some money on, which side you're going to lean toward. But today, doing things a little bit different than we normally do on Southeastern CaroLINES. Normally, I give you my picks, kind of some tidbits that may help you decide what you want to put money on. But I think with the entire slate this week, there are a lot of things that seem very obvious. So pointing out the obvious, and then pointing out some things that may not be as obvious in terms of betting comes, and some things that you may want to put some money on that you didn't originally think of before. So first up, like I mentioned, Arkansas Pine Bluff. Arkansas in Little Rock at War Memorial Stadium. Last season was the first season in a long time that Arkansas had not played a game in Little Rock. That game at War Memorial Stadium is a huge deal in the state of Arkansas. So a little in-state rivalry with Arkansas Pine Bluff and Arkansas and Little Rock. So Arkansas this season had a little bit of a fall from grace. They started the season 4-0. They were one of the hottest teams in college football, but now they stand on the other side of a really tough 3-game stretch. Lost 3 games in a row, now sitting at 4-3. Arkansas now unranked with a really tough stretch coming up. Mississippi State, they traveled to LSU, they traveled to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. So Arkansas had a fall from grace, and things aren't really getting much easier for them. So they know that they need some momentum moving forward into this tough stretch, trying to get them out of that 3-game stretch that they've had so far. So I know that Arkansas is going to want to win this game, and they're going to win it. They're going to want to win it handedly to get some confidence underneath them. And I think that's kind of the obvious here today, is that Arkansas is going to win, and they're going to win handedly. So Arkansas Pine Bluff quarterback Skylar Perry is only completing about 46% of his passes. He has 827 yards on the season, 2 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Wide receivers Josh Wilkes and Dalen Hill have combined for only 503 receiving yards, only 3 touchdowns. Their ground game is averaging about 126 yards per game, so pretty solid running game there, but their defense allows 414 yards per game on average. So I think Arkansas is just going to eat up this Arkansas Pine Bluff defense, and especially this Arkansas Pine Bluff offense can't really get things moving in the air. As opposed to Arkansas, you see KJ Jefferson completing 62% of his passes, almost 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. Arkansas wide receivers Traylon Burks and Tyson Morris combined for almost 900 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. Their ground game is averaging about 250 yards per game. So Arkansas has the advantage on every side of the ball here. So I don't even know what the spread is on this game. They haven't released it yet, but whatever it is, I'm taking Arkansas against the spread. I think that's fairly obvious here. But what's not as obvious is just how big of a game will this be for Arkansas's offense. I think we can expect them to put up a ton of yards on offense. I think we can expect them to put up a ton of points. But that's not the obvious thing here, is exactly how much will this Arkansas offense eat. And I think the real money in this game, since Arkansas feels like the very, very obvious favorite here, is just to focus on some prop bets. That's going to be the best way to make a lot of money here. So first touchdown score. This one I think is interesting because Traylon Burks scored the first touchdown of the day for the second time this season last week. KJ Jefferson is the only other one on that team to score the first touchdown in 2 games, doing so against Rice and Ole Miss. Dominique Johnson, Traylon Smith have each done it once. So I think your best bet here is to look at Traylon Burks or KJ Jefferson here. Now my bet, and this is based on really nothing but the fact that I just think that KJ Jefferson is going to run it in for Arkansas's first touchdown of the day. So that's where I would put my money and make a little bit more money off of those prop bets, since this game kind of already seems decided. They still got to go out there. They still got to fight for it, but that's where I'm focusing here for the Arkansas Pine Bluff Arkansas game, is the first touchdown score. 2:30 game of the day, CBS primetime game for the SEC. LSU travels to Oxford to take on number 12 Ole Miss. Now, the conversation after the Tennessee game about Ole Miss, it wasn't about the fact that Tennessee played a great game. It wasn't about the fact that Tennessee was able to limit Ole Miss pretty much on their offense. It was all about the escapades happening after the game. But Ole Miss didn't look their best against Tennessee. And Matt Corral, according to Lane Kiffin, may or may not be healthy enough to start this game. So I'm actually going to take LSU plus 8.5 here, minus 112. You can take Ole Miss on the money line because I do think that they win this game, but you can get Ole Miss on the money line at minus 355. Not really worth it. So I'm going to take LSU plus 8.5. Now, obviously, there has been some big shakeup at LSU, announced on Sunday after LSU upset Florida that LSU and Coach O would separate ways at the end of the season. But another thing that has kind of been shaken up at LSU is this brand new ground game. This ground game has finally gotten some life breathed into it. Tyrion Davis-Price rushed for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns in their loss against Kentucky. But the real show came last week against Florida. He set a new school record, 287 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns against the Gators. Almost 300 yards rushing, breaking Leonard Fournette's former record. So crazy day for Tyrion Davis-Price. With the loss of wide receiver Kayshon Boutte, LSU is absolutely going to have to get that run game going. And against Ole Miss's defense, I think that'll absolutely be possible. And there's also been some shakeup at Ole Miss as well, but it may not necessarily work in their favor. I mentioned Matt Corral may or may not be healthy enough to start this game. Lane Kiffin told reporters after the Tennessee game that his status is up in the air. He ran the ball 30 times against Tennessee. Just a little bit of wear and tear for Matt Corral after that game. But Ed Orgeron isn't buying it. He said in a press conference it may just all be smoke and mirrors. He feels like this possible Heisman contender is healthy enough for this game. So I think that we can expect LSU to prepare as if Matt Corral is playing. But I think the obvious here for this game is that it's going to be a high-scoring game. LSU, if they can get that ground game running, if they can continue to run the ball, which I think they will against this Ole Miss defense, improved from last year, but pretty trash defense, LSU could totally capitalize on that, and they will need to if they want any shot at winning. And I know that Ole Miss has the fifth highest scoring offense in the country. I know that LSU will be without their top 2 corners, so Ole Miss could totally eat up on that as well. So I think we do know it's very obvious that this is going to be a high-scoring game. But the over-under is set at 76.5. But I'm actually going to take the under. 77 points is a lot. And I don't want to risk the fact that Matt Corral could be out and Ole Miss isn't moving the ball like we normally do. This is only a newfound offense. This is not a habit. So without Matt Corral, I'm not quite sure how much Ole Miss can get that ball moving. So I'm taking the point total under 76.5 at minus 110. But I think what's not so obvious with this game is who is going to win this game. If you're putting your money on it, I lean toward Ole Miss. But if Matt Corral isn't playing, if LSU can get things moving on the ground, Ole Miss's defense is going to have a really tough time trying to stop it. I would not be surprised if LSU ends up winning this game by maybe a field goal. If it's really kind of a rubber match going back and forth with the lead throughout the game, I would not be surprised to see LSU potentially snag a win in this game. LSU can play like they have nothing to lose because they have nothing to lose. Ed Orgeron has already lost his job. So win or lose this game, it doesn't really affect anything. So I think LSU can go out there confidently knowing that they have nothing to lose. If they get a win against Ole Miss, it's only a better notch on their schedule. So I think, LSU could go out there and stun the people. But I think that if Matt Corral does play, then Ole Miss will put up a ton of yards on offense. And it might just be a little bit too much for LSU to stop, especially with so many of their starters out with injuries. We've got Tennessee going to Tuscaloosa, taking on number 4 Alabama, which still feels kind of weird to say number 4 Alabama since I'm so used to saying number 1 Alabama, maybe number 2 Alabama. But Tennessee moving into Tuscaloosa for the 3rd Saturday in October, Tennessee, Alabama tonight. So Alabama has won 14 straight against Tennessee going back to 2006. It's a 12-10 victory in 2009, and that was the closest battle they've had yet. But this year, Tennessee's team seems like it has a little bit more firepower that they can bring into Alabama. I mean, Alabama's averaging 483 yards of offense per game this season. That is the 12th best in the country. But Tennessee is at the 16th best. They're averaging 473 yards per offense. So I think this game could be closer than it traditionally has been in the past. But I still think it's obvious that Alabama is going to win this game. Similar to Ole Miss, kind of a mystery who's going to start at quarterback. Hendon Hooker left the Ole Miss game in the fourth quarter, limped off the field. Now it was confirmed that it was not an ACL tear. I think a lot of Tennessee fans were a little bit concerned that it was an ACL tear. It's confirmed that it is not. Hendon Hooker could get the start. But if Joe Milton does start this game, he is not accurate. He's too inconsistent. He makes bad decisions, which we saw at the end of the Ole Miss game. Tennessee's offense is quick, but its O-line allows a ton of sacks. So I do think that Alabama is going to take advantage of this. So I think with the inconsistency at the offensive line and the question at quarterback, I think it's obvious that Alabama is going to win this game here. But what's not obvious is by how much. The spread here is set at 25, which I think Tennessee very much so could cover. Tennessee is tied with Ole Miss for the national lead in plays per minute at almost 3. Tennessee averages 1.5 points per minute, 6th best in the FBS. Combine their offensive speed, combine their quickness, and a pretty scary pass rush. I mean, that could stress Bryce Young. That could hurry him up a little bit more. He does not have a ton of experience here. So I think with the quickness of Tennessee's offense, that could intimidate Bryce Young a bit to be able to bridge that gap. I mean, Alabama has allowed over 300 yards only twice this year. Once was in a close call against Florida. Second was in a loss against Texas A&M. Tennessee has yet to come up with fewer than 375 yards. So Tennessee very much so could put some pressure on Alabama if they can continue to knock that yardage up. If they can get to the 350, 375, even 400-yard mark, they could have a great chance at covering this spread. Don't know if they're going to be able to get the win. I haven't seen enough from Tennessee to be able to confidently feel like they could beat the number 4 team in the nation. But I do think that Tennessee keeps it closer than 25. So I'm going to take Tennessee against the spread at plus 25 in Tuscaloosa. Last game for me today, South Carolina going to College Station to take on number 17 Texas A&M. The spread here is 19.5, and that's exactly what I'm going to take here. What's obvious is that Texas A&M is going to win this game. They dominated Missouri last week, 35-14, after beating Alabama the week before. Now, I think what we've seen from Missouri is their defense is not very good. So it's a little bit troubling that Texas A&M was only able to put up 35 points, but Isaiah Spiller had himself a day. He rushed for 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 20 carries, hasn't hit 160 yards in 3 of its last 4 games. Big plays down the field just haven't really been there for Texas A&M. So, they were able to get it done against Missouri, but the South Carolina defense is a little bit more improved than Missouri. So I think that Texas A&M may have a little bit of a difficult time putting up points here. But South Carolina only squeaked by Vanderbilt 21-20. That was only their first conference win. South Carolina is rebuilding. They're scoring only 22 points per game, 109th best in the nation out of 130 FBS teams. So even though Texas A&M has had a little bit of difficulty getting that ball moving, with the exception of the Alabama game, because they very much so got the ball moving against Alabama, I think that they're able to beat South Carolina and beat them handedly, because South Carolina's quarterback, Luke Doty, is out for the year with a foot injury. Zeb Nolan, the grad assistant, is in at starting quarterback. Can he really get the job done? I personally don't think that he's going to be able to. So I think that Texas A&M is able to cover the spread there. But what's not necessarily obvious in this game is which Texas A&M will show up. I mean, are we going to see the Texas A&M that we saw against Alabama that just seemed unstoppable? Or are we going to get the Texas A&M that could not get anything moving against Arkansas? I mean, South Carolina, is allowing 325 total yards per game, including only 173 passing yards per outing. That's 12th best in the nation. South Carolina's defense is nothing to scoff at. I think the Aggies will need to get their running game going like they did against Missouri, rather than rely on Zach Calzada to be able to get it done in the air. But I mean, Texas A&M's offense has not hit 160 yards in 3 of its last 4 games. So Texas A&M's got to get things moving, but South Carolina just really cannot seem to figure out how to get things moving on offense. I think Texas A&M wins handedly here. So I'll do a little recap for everybody so you can put your money on these games. Arkansas Pine Bluff, Arkansas at a neutral site game in Little Rock at War Memorial Stadium. I don't even know what the spread is here. I'm going to say it's a lot. Taking Arkansas against the spread, but focus on some prop bets here. I am taking KJ Jefferson to run it in for the first touchdown of the game. LSU traveling to Oxford to take on Ole Miss. LSU had a big game against Florida. If they can get that run game going, I think they keep the game close. It can be LSU plus 8.5, minus 112. Tennessee traveling to Tuscaloosa, and I think that Tennessee is able to give Alabama a little bit of a run for their money. I think they cover the spread at 25. I think Alabama wins this game, but Tennessee's offense has been quick and they have been incredibly effective. So I think that Tennessee keeps it tight. South Carolina traveling to Texas A&M. I do not think that South Carolina is able to keep it tight. So I think that Texas A&M covers the spread there at minus 20. But that is going to do it for me today here. I appreciate 312 Pizza Company for hosting me every Saturday for Southeastern CaroLINES every Saturday at 10 a.m. They are hiring. So if you're looking for a job, if you're looking to find a little bit of extra cash on the side, come out to 312 Pizza Company, fill out an application. And if you're not looking for a job, just come out to 312 Pizza Company and watch some of the games for the day here. Grab some beers, grab some pizza. It's a great place to hang out and watch some games. That is going to do it for me. I'm your host every Saturday at 10 a.m. for Southeastern CaroLINES. I'm Caroline Fenton. You can follow me on Twitter at CarolineFenton1, and every Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 on Stillman & Company on ESPN 102.5 The Game.